In Gaza, the Hamas-run health ministry says Israeli airstrikes have killed more than 200 people since Thursday. At least 10 Palestinians are reported to have been killed overnight. Israel says it's targeting Hamas fighters and infrastructure. The attacks come after the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Israel planned to resume indirect talks with Hamas to end the war. Our correspondent Jonah Fisher gave us this update from Jerusalem.
Yeah, those strikes continued overnight, as you mentioned, in the central part of Gaza in particular. We are hearing reports that at least 10 people were killed in several strikes around the central part of Gaza, also reports of strikes elsewhere. It has clearly been a very bloody few days in both central and northern Gaza. The Hamas-run Ministry of Health put out one of their regular updates this morning saying that 88 people had been killed in the last 24 hours, bringing the total to more than 200 since Thursday. We've heard also from the IDF in the last 24 hours. It's clear that they have been striking a lot of targets as well. They said they'd hit about 100 sites over the weekend, and that some of those sites that they've been targeting had been sites that had been used to launch projectiles, rockets, out of Gaza towards Israel. So that some of the places which they've been going for is trying to hit those areas where those rockets are being launched out of.
Jonah Fisher. Ukraine has launched a new offensive in Kursk, a region of Russia it partially occupied in a lightning incursion 5 months ago. Its forces fanned out in 3 directions from their main base at Sudzha. President Zelensky's chief of staff said Russia was getting what it deserved. In recent weeks, Moscow's been trying to squeeze the Ukrainians out of Kursk with the support of North Korean troops. Our correspondent in Kiev, Will Vernon, has the latest.
Well, this operation is still in its early days, early hours, really. The Russian Defense Ministry in a statement earlier said that Ukraine launched this offensive in the Kursk region at around 8 o'clock this morning local time, and that fighting was ongoing. And you mentioned the head of the Ukrainian presidential administration, Andriy Yermak. He didn't confirm the operation in a post on social media, but he did hint at it, saying there was good news from Kursk region and that the Russians were getting what they deserved. I've also been reading some of the pro-Kremlin military bloggers. They've also been saying that Ukraine has launched a major operation in the Kursk region. But, of course, there's a lot we don't know. We don't know what scale this is on and whether it will lead to any change whatsoever in Ukraine's pretty tenuous position on the battlefield.
How likely is it to change what's happening on the front line in Kursk, though?
Well, it's difficult to say at this stage. I mean, Ukraine is on the defensive in Kursk region. They launched that shock incursion into the Kursk region back in August, managed to seize quite a large chunk of territory. At the time, it wasn't entirely clear what the intention was. There was speculation that perhaps they were trying to draw Russian forces away from other parts of the battlefield in the east of the country, for example. President Zelensky later said that the operation was designed to be used as a bargaining chip in any future peace talks with Russia. But the Ukrainians made pretty good progress, but then Russian forces counterattacked. And in recent weeks, Ukraine has been losing ground in the Kursk region. Russian forces, of course, have been bolstered by the presence of several thousand troops from North Korea. So Ukraine has been on the back foot in the Kursk region. Russia hasn't managed to knock them out of the area altogether. Ukraine has hung on there, has hung on, for example, onto the key town of Sudzha. So we'll have to see whether this new operation that appears to have been launched today will make any difference, will be able to be sustained, right? Because Ukrainian forces badly need a victory. Morale here is low. Ukraine is losing ground in the east of the country. Russia's made significant gains there. So Ukrainians really need to show to their own people here, to Western countries, and most importantly of all, to the incoming Donald Trump administration, that they can still mount offensive operations and they can still win. They can still achieve victories, even ones that are relatively small.
Will Vernon in Kiev.
Heavy snow and freezing rain is causing widespread disruption across the UK, with amber warnings in place in parts of northern England, the Midlands and Wales. Forecasters say up to 40 centimetres of snow could fall in some places, and temperatures overnight fell as low as -11 Celsius. The runway at Leeds Bradford Airport is closed due to snow and ice. After being closed earlier, the runways at Liverpool and Manchester airports have now reopened. But there are warnings of more delays and disruption to come. Let's go live now to West Yorkshire. We can speak to our correspondent Nikki Schiller, who's there for us. And how is it there, Nikki?
Yes, Lucy, you mentioned Leeds Bradford Airport. We're about 5 miles from Leeds Bradford Airport, and you can see why that runway is closed. The snow is still coming down here in Leeds. This is in the amber warning area for snow, and this covers a large part of northern England, including North Yorkshire, West Yorkshire. It goes up to Northumberland and across to Cumbria and those borders near Scotland. So a large area of England expecting, and some areas already getting snow. You mentioned that 40 centimetres of snow. There is a concern that that will be in the Pennines area, which is high up, but we are already seeing 12 centimetres of snow in Bingley and 10 centimetres of snow in Shap in Cumbria. And you can just see, if I show you my boot here, that this is quite deep here. This has been settling overnight, and you know, I can get my hand clearly into there. So you can see the amount of snow that has fallen here, and it's been falling like this for a good 3 or 4 hours now. Now, the issues with the airports are beginning to ease, as you mentioned, in Manchester and Liverpool, but we are now looking at disruption on the trains because, of course, when snow and ice falls on those lines and the trains start operating, they find that they can't always get through. So Northern Rail have got cancellations and delays, so have ScotRail, and so down in the southwest of England have GWR. So what is the picture across here in West Yorkshire and North Yorkshire? Well, my colleague Eunice Muller is in Harrogate in North Yorkshire and has this update for us.
Well, as you can see, it is snowing here in Harrogate in North Yorkshire. I was just listening to that interview about snowplows, and we've seen plenty of those here. In fact, at one stage, there was one particular snowplow that got stuck. Its wheels were going round and round for a good minute or so. So that gives you an idea of what the conditions are like here. That snow is settling. The chances are perhaps there'll be some rain later on to clear it, but at the moment there's a lot of effort being made to clear some of the snow off close to buildings. There are people who are parked up who are trying to leave Harrogate. I was speaking to one woman earlier who has got a flight at Leeds Bradford Airport, and that was meant to be this morning. She's now been told that'll be later this afternoon. That's because of that runway closure. A number of runways have been closed at several airports, including Leeds Bradford, Liverpool, John Lennon and Manchester International Airport as well. That runway has reopened, the one in Manchester, so hopefully passengers who are trying to leave the country can do so later this afternoon, even though there'll be delays, and inevitably there are cancellations as well. Now, we were told that the north of England would get it particularly bad, would bear the brunt of the heavy snow, and you can see that is exactly what has happened here. That's had obviously ruined some people's plans who may want to travel. That is, if you want to still travel in these conditions, the advice of course is to take something with you, like a blanket or a shovel or some food, just in case you get stuck. Away from the north of England, if you look at the south of England, again, airports have been affected there. Rail, trains are affected. Homes, there have been many homes have been left without power. Earlier, there were around 2,000 homes in the northwest of England. A number of homes here in the Yorkshire side of the north of England as well. So clearly the snow is disrupting people's lives, and this cold start to the new year and 2025. Now, as the day develops, we had one amber warning until around midday. There's the other amber warning for severe weather, which goes on until midnight. So people are still being warned about the impact this snow, heavy snow, can have, and that freezing rain as well, which will make the conditions out there there quite treacherous. Now I can see a lot of people out and about, well wrapped up, keeping warm, and that of course is the advice. There'll be those people, families perhaps with children, who will want to go out there and use that snow and try and have some fun with sledging and that kind of thing. But really there are alerts around from the UK Health Security Agency. There'll be vulnerable people out there as well, so please keep warm is the advice.
Yeah, that is good advice, to try and keep warm. The advice from National Highways is if you don't have to go out on the roads today, then don't. But if you are going out on the roads, then make sure you are prepared. Have things like water, a blanket, also a fully charged mobile phone. As you can see here in Leeds, there have been cars going by and people are getting out and about. I think it's eased slightly by the fact that it is a Sunday today and people haven't had to go into work like they would have to on a work day. There's also some good news for football fans. Of course, there is a very big game at Anfield that is this afternoon between Liverpool and Manchester United. There was a meeting of the safety team this morning at Liverpool, and at the moment that game is going ahead. They will have another meeting at midday just to make sure that everything is all right, but they are also telling fans to be really careful about travelling to that game and don't take any unnecessary risks. So what can we expect for the rest of today? What is the situation at the moment in terms of the weather? Sarah Keith-Lucas is from the BBC Weather Centre and gave us this update a little earlier.
This has been forecast for several days now, hasn't it? And it is going to plan. We are seeing that heavy snow, and actually quite a large area has been hit through the course of the night and early on this morning. That snow swept right across much of England and Wales. Although it's turned back to rain in the south now, it is northern England that's going to be bearing the brunt of the worst of the snow. So not far from where you are, Nikki, West Yorkshire, this is Todmorden. And actually, if we take a look at snow depths across northern England, parts of Wales into Scotland as well, we're seeing between around about 3 to 10 centimetres for many areas. Bingley and West Yorkshire now is up to 16 centimetres of snow there. So these are the official weather observations, but some areas are seeing a lot more than this, particularly over the higher ground of the Northern Pennines, for instance. That's where we could see 40 centimetres. So far, this is where we've seen snow falling. This is the recent radar. It's now starting to clear from North Wales and the North Midlands, but still persisting for much of northern England into southern Scotland. Bit of winteriness into Northern Ireland as well. So icy conditions for many, even if you haven't got the heavy snow. Now, further south, you can see this large area of blue. The milder air is kicking in, and we've got really heavy rain around as well. So it's wet in the south. It's white in the north. Those amber warnings for snow and ice are continuing. The one towards the south, so this one here, North Wales into the North Midlands, that's going to expire fairly soon. So where we see the snow here turning back to rain, certainly a risk of some icy conditions, but it's across this warning area here across much of northern England that we're going to continue to see a lot more snow. So up to 40 centimetres. And of course, we've heard about the disruption that's been ongoing today with all of the snow, with the ice as well. But as well, it's going to be that heavy rain further south that's going to continue to cause, I think, disruption for the rest of the day.
That's Sarah Keith-Lucas, and of course you can get a weather forecast for where you are on the BBC Weather website and app. Northern Ireland seems to have escaped most of the weather. A different kettle of fish in the Republic of Ireland there. They have 28,000 people without power at the moment, trying to reconnect them. Now we have a live page up and running on the BBC News website and app with the very latest from our correspondents across the country. There's all that information about which rail services are running and indeed about the airports. A reminder that Leeds Bradford here still has its runway shut. Lucy, for the moment, from a rather snowy Leeds here in West Yorkshire, back to you in the rather nice warm studio in London.
Yeah, sorry about that, Nikki. We'll swap. Thanks very much to Nikki Schiller there for us in Leeds.
The 6-day state funeral of America's 39th President Jimmy Carter has begun in his native Georgia. He died last week at the age of 100. Former and current Secret Service agents assigned to the Carter Protective Division transported the former president's remains to the hearse. Crowds lined the streets to pay their respects as the motorcade passed through Mr. Carter's hometown of Plains and onto his childhood home. And the National Park Service saluted President Carter and rang the historic farm bell 39 times. His motorcade will travel to Atlanta to the Carter Presidential Center, where he will lie in repose until early on Tuesday. The body will then be flown to Washington, D.C., where he will lie in state at the Capitol Rotunda. His national funeral will be held at the National Cathedral on January the 9th. Well, I'm joined by my colleague Carl Nasman, who's at the Carter Center in the city of Atlanta and following today's proceedings for us. Carl, it's been quite a ceremony already, but days to come as the US honours Jimmy Carter, who, of course, reached the incredible age of 100.
Yeah, he was America's, America's oldest living president, 100 years of age. We're here in Atlanta, outside of the Carter Center and Presidential Library, really kind of the headquarters of his post-presidency, where he did so much work for many decades after leaving the White House. We should say there's already a bit of a memorial outside here in front of the sign, people coming by, leaving flowers, little bits of mementos. There's actually a box of peanuts out there for the peanut farmer from Georgia. We saw that video there from his boyhood farm. There are also, of course, people here who knew the former president best. We're going to be speaking with one of them now. I just want to bring in Dr. Jenny Lincoln, Senior Advisor for Latin America and the Caribbean at the Carter Center. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's a somber day, obviously, today, as we see this motorcade, the country getting a chance to pay its respects, say goodbye to the former president. What are your thoughts today?
My thoughts are that for President Carter, this is a celebration of his life, a recognition of a life well-lived, long-lived, and in total service to humanity.
You worked with the former president, obviously, here at the Carter Center. You were saying you joined in, what, 1988, so just a couple of years really after this building was built. What was it like working with a former president who had just as much energy as he did when he was in the White House, didn't he?
It was very inspiring. And what you think of Jimmy Carter is that he is exactly what he is. Totally transparent, honest, with high integrity, dedicated to serve others. He felt that he was put on this earth to serve others, and he led his life that way, and he inspired that in the staff.
And, you know, he's a boy from Georgia, son of a peanut farmer. He came into the White House, obviously, and pretty much immediately he had plenty to deal with internationally. There were some things he worked with in Latin America. One of the first kind of big international treaties, at least, was in Panama. This situation with the Panama Canal, arranging which was not a popular political move at the time, to give the canal back to Panama. Just walk us through, how he related to Panama and the region of Latin America.
Well, Panama is an example of what he thought was right. And even if it's not popular, it's better to do the thing that was right. And at the time, it was a choice, and a very important one for the hemisphere, for which, in the hemisphere, he is widely respected for that. And the Panama Canal, it took a quarter of a decade to turn over the Panama Canal to Panama, and it is now thriving and a major economic waterway for commerce across the world. So what Jimmy Carter brought to the hemisphere was a representation of his dedication to serve others and to do the right thing.
In terms of your work, the Carter Center's work in Latin America, really promoting democracy and also monitoring elections, isn't that right?
Yes, I think his legacy from the presidency is very much to human rights, because he came into the presidency at a time when there were military dictatorships in Latin America, and he pressed governments, even the military dictatorships, to champion human rights. And then democracy. It was a wave. He came in at a time that there was a wave of the military going back into the barracks and elections being held. So when he left the Carter Center, one of the first things he did was engage in election observation and supporting the democratic processes and the people's right to choose their own leaders.
And I know, obviously, you've served, and just briefly, if you don't mind, about 20 seconds left, but you were recently in Venezuela monitoring that election.
Yes. And there, the Carter Center, again, proved that what was true about another election in the hemisphere.
Really impressive work by the Carter Center and, of course, the former president himself. Dr. Jenny Lynch, Senior Advisor for Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you for stopping by to talk with us about your work and, of course, your relationship with the former president as well. And as we continue to follow the day's developments, that state funeral just beginning here in his home state of Georgia, that procession will be coming back here to Atlanta in about a couple hours' time or so. We have been speaking with some of his relatives as well, actually. Jason Carter, the grandson of Jimmy Carter, speaking recently to the BBC. Here's a bit of what he had to say.
You know, for me, the memories and the remarkable thing really is that he wasn't any different in private than he was in public. And I think for us, that meant we would sit around at the dinner table at Christmas time and we would talk about rare African diseases. But we also just went fishing and went to baseball games and did the things that you do with your grandfather.
From early on, he gave you advice, didn't you? And you took it.
Yeah, his mother turned 70 in the Peace Corps. And when he got out of the White House in his 50s, I think she was standing behind him saying, I turned 70 in the Peace Corps. What are you going to do? And so I think that was motivating to him. And when I was a young, 21-year-old whippersnapper and said, what do you think I should do? He said, you should go to Africa and live in a village in the Peace Corps. And I did it, and it was life-changing for me.
Was it his personal choice to tour all these important places posthumously?
He will be in the places that defined him in many ways. Plains, Georgia is where it begins. We'll come to Atlanta, to the Carter Center, and then to the U.S. Capitol and to Lion State as the former president. And so I think those things are appropriate. And again, it may not be what you normally would have for your grandfather, but I think for him and his relationship with the American people, at least, he felt good about it.
It's the grandson of Jimmy Carter there. And Carl, it's been fascinating to read so much of the political history of Jimmy Carter's presidency and how his legacy has been judged since, of course, he left office, a one-term president. And this funeral, this week-long memorial comes at a time of huge political change in the US as President Trump is about to be inaugurated. It's a really fascinating contrast, isn't it, to see this outgoing president, but also as the US looks ahead to what is coming politically down the track, what has changed, and what are the challenges that America still faces.
Yeah, it's quite the time right here in the US. Obviously, the inauguration of the next president, Donald Trump, that'll be on January 20th, only a few days away. Joe Biden, one of his final acts, will be delivering the eulogy at that memorial service in Washington, D.C. in just a few days' time. We saw some interactions, I guess if you want to call them, between Jimmy Carter when he was still alive and President Trump. They didn't seem to really get along. They both had some quips for each other, I guess you could put it that way, but we did see a very gracious note on social media from Donald Trump when Jimmy Carter passed away, acknowledging his life and what he did, especially in this post-presidency. It is really interesting as well to look at the legacy of President Carter while he was in office, leaving the White House at the time in 1981 as one of the least popular presidents almost of all time when it comes to his approval ratings. That legacy and what he was able to accomplish while he was president has been now slowly reevaluated over the years, looking at what he did, his accomplishments, his environmental record, what he did on the international stage, obviously the Camp David Accords, which is now one of the most durable and longest lasting treaties that in the world, really, between Egypt and Israel. That peace is still lasting between those countries today. That was a significant moment, of course, and one that he's probably most known for when it comes to his presidency. But that post-presidency, really what many people know him for now, that presidency a long time away. You talk to people here and it's been decades since he was in the White House. But a lot of those memories coming back, a lot of those discussions, and we'll continue to talk about it, of course, as that memorial continues here in Georgia.
Thank you, Carl. We'll be back with you soon. So for now, thanks to you and the team there.